What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? Little town I grew up in had these two car dealerships on opposite sides of town, one Chevy, one Ford. They were bitter rivals. Attack ads, crap talking salesmen, billboard wars, you name it. When the owner of the Chevy dealership died, it came out he'd also owned the Ford dealership by way of a shell company. No one saw that coming, including a lot of the higher ups who worked at the dealerships. I graduated law and got engaged to the girl I had been with through university. We both applied for the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding I found out she was cheating on me with our mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city and the legal world is pretty bloody small there, too. And everywhere I went I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down, her too, as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathe more than any other in the world. Years ago my company was slowly going under, so I was looking for other jobs. I got a job with another company and put in my 2 weeks with my manager. I've been offered another job and I'm taking it. I'm putting in my notice. Manager: oh, well, we hate to lose you. Do you mind me asking where you will be going? I'm going to company. Manager: me. Manager: I applied for that position too. I'm sorry to tell you that you didn't get it. My grandfather's funeral. He was always a fairly reserved and distant father as far as I understood. Would fit the stereotype of a northern dockworker who comes home expecting dinner to be in the table and then goes to the pub or evening via the bookers. Anyway, an unsurprising heart attack later. We're all gathered for his funeral. We are a big but close family, so we know everyone, including his friends. However, one guy turns up, about the same age as my dad and his siblings, who nobody knows. Long story short, turns out it was my grandfather's son. From another family, from another marriage, that went on for as long as his marriage to my grandmother. My grandfather had maintained 2 marriages over 40 years, having 7 children with my grandmother and just the one with this other woman. They knew about our family and kept away, and apparently my grandmother knew about them but kept quiet. Turns out he wasn't going to the pub every night. Was out with a friend of mine, who ran into her dad and his other family. I knew a woman who was going through divorce proceedings with her husband. He was always argumentative and borderline abusive towards her, certainly always shouting and demeaning. Then, just as the divorce was entering its final stages, he very suddenly died. His autopsy showed that he had a massive undiagnosed brain tumor which had been physically altering his personality. His wife felt all kinds of guilty afterwards and took it out on everyone she talked to, and lost a lot of friends in the process. The one guy I worked with was having a baby. He told me about his GF. Yeah, she's pretty big but she's amazing. She's the one for me. I didn't know him very well, but as he talked about the pregnancy and so forth, and I gave him encouraging words and how his life was going to change so much, we bonded a bit. His baby was going to be born right before Christmas. He missed our work Christmas party because his baby was being born. We expect him to be gone for paternity leave, but he shows up a few days later. I feared the worst, that the baby had died. It turned out his girlfriend was lying about being pregnant to spend more time with him. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the fact that he brought up she was fat for no reason must have meant she was so fat you couldn't tell whether she was pregnant or not. She showed him someone else's ultrasounds. They talked about what they would name their baby, how they'd handle taking care of it, all that crap. I don't know what she thought was gonna happen when 9 months passed and no baby. I guess it's good she came clean though. A more diabolical person would have faked a miscarriage or something. but that was seriously messed up. Shortly after the dude left, so I don't really know how he handled it. 1991. I'm 19. Just signed the lease for my first solo apartment. Just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit the paycheck at an ATM. Another first. I'd always gone into the bank to do it. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong. I should have at least $200. I'd been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked. I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at a theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And tell them I was going to call them anyway, because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card and your $200. So come down to the police station. They tell me I can't figure out how they have my card in the cash. Doesn't make sense. I drive down there. Detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use an ATM and saw a man acting suspiciously while he was using it, moving back and forth as if trying to dodge the camera. Bob says the man then left the ATM, got into a car, and drove away at high speeds as if fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200, and then another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob realized he had withdrawn the money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police and reported the attempted theft. The detective gives me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5 feet 7 inches, brown hair, round gold rimmed glasses. I say out loud so, about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine. Before realizing Bob was describing me, I'd never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left, because I'm a freaking idiot. I drove away at high speeds, because I was 19 and that's how I drove everywhere. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet I still have the police report where I'm both the victim and the perp. A few years ago I got invited to a friend's engagement party. They were throwing a huge bash because they were planning on a very small destination wedding. Later in the evening, my friend's fiance takes the mic and starts thanking everyone for being there. Sorry, Jen will be out to thank you guys in a minute. She's just having a wardrobe malfunction. He goes on to tell the story about how they met, how they were best friends, and decided to get engaged and finished along the lines of we wish you could all be there, and that we could get married right now. So we are going to. Out walks Jen in her wedding dress. I used to call my tutor Mr. for the first 8 months of tutoring, just to find out she was a woman. I once had a job interview. It was very early in my career, and I was trying to move 500 miles to a new place. I built prototypes and brought samples of my work. It was a 9-hour drive, but everyone seemed so enthusiastic that I figured it was a lock. I did not get the job. I found another job in the area and took it. 6 months later they called and asked me to interview for the job above the one I had applied for. I was given an offer on the spot and worked there almost a decade. In the first few months the people there told me the guy whose job I had, who would have been my boss if he hired me initially, had actually said the samples and work I did was beyond him, and he didn't want an employee who knew more than him. Well, I guess he doesn't have that problem, since they fired him and replaced him with me. My mom and a gal pal went to Mexico for break during college. They had a great time. While boarding the return flight her friend says, "Sorry, I'm staying," and runs off. My mom hears from her a few weeks later after not being able to contact her at all. This was the 70s. Long distance calls and phones were scarce. Turns out her friend been sneaking off nights and fricking the hotel gardener. She loves him and stayed in Mexico. That's all my mom knows. Hopefully they lived happily ever after. Update, I found out the woman's name and believe I have found the correct one on social media. She got married in 1979, which lines up with the story, but she lives in Green Bay now. I was a Starbucks barista before the whole names on cups thing was big, or at least it wasn't really practiced in my tiny store. There was this very cute guy who came in maybe 4-6x a week, a little often, but nothing out of the ordinary. I flirted like mad. He flirted back. It was all great. Then he comes in with his fiancée. I was betrayed and treated him coldly from then on. A month later, two of him come in together, and I find out that they are twins, and I'd shot down any chance I had with a single one. Worked at a small company summers during college. Two dudes that work there, Mike and John, are best friends since high school, and Mike is getting married to his high school sweetheart. 9 months after the wedding, the girl has a baby, and it looks nothing like Mike, but a lot like John, and she reveals that she had sex with John on her wedding day before she actually got married. She divorces Mike, marries John the next day, and Mike and John are not friends anymore. One of my good friends in high school started hanging out with this guy from the other public high school in our city, and before long they were basically joined at the hip. She had a huge crush on him and was pretty sure he liked her too, but she'd never had a boyfriend before and was too shy to make the first move. One night they were hanging out, and he told her he had something huge to confess. He was gay. They remained close friends. Then a few months later at a party, the guy introduced all of us to his younger, by 1 year, brother. The dude and his brother looked similar, had similar personalities and the exact same sense of humor. Fast forward 20 years, and my friend is happily married to the brother. Her best friend is her brother-in-law, and he and his husband are godfathers to her kids. Sometimes the painful crush on the gay dude pays off. I was seeing a guy from Tinder for a couple of months, but it fizzled out, and we stopped talking. I was on Tinder again shortly after, and matched with a girl, I'm B, who told me to follow her on Insta. I noticed the Tinder guy also followed her, so I ask how she knows him. She hits me with he was dating my best friend for ages, but they broke up a couple weeks ago because he was freaking some girl from Tinder. I work at a prison and a lady flew all the way from Nigeria to visit her brother who was supposed to be incarcerated at my unit. She speaks little English, but we tried to explain to her that the inmate was not in the system anymore. He must have been released. We call a supervisor, and it turns out he was released over 5 months before. She walks away confused and come back in with her husband, who speaks English much better. We tell him the scenario and he asks, well, where did he go? He doesn't have any friends or family in the US. We told him we don't know where he went. He was released, he could be anywhere. The guy, obviously confused, says well, he couldn't have gone anywhere because he doesn't have any legs. So a legless Nigerian ex-felon with no ties is rowley scooting around the US and no one knows where he is. My esthetician was giving a Brazilian wax to a new client. New client goes on and on about this new guy she is dating and how he's a bartender at Z's. Esthetician's boyfriend was the bartender. Always fun to find out you are knee deep waxing the pussy of the woman you are being cheated on with. For a semester in high school, my English teacher set up this game where one student was a secret killer. Every couple of days the killer would sneak a note into a classmate's locker, backpack, textbook or whatever that says you've been killed. My best friend and I were trying harder than anyone else in the class to play detective on this, especially near the end of the semester. Near the end of school there were about 6 students left alive, and it turns out my best friend was the killer the whole time. When I was a teen some 25 years ago, I played trumpet in the school band. We did a Halloween parade, but I had nothing to dress in costume for. I decided on a large black sheet with a hole in the top for my huge ponytail to stick out from the top in all its glory of crazy frizzy poof of curls, and a hole for my face and arms to stick out. I got a lot of "daffy are you supposed to be?" I don't know. Or was it, I suppose? Anyway, after the parade, my mother wanted to see my locker before leaving just to surprise check for anything not allowed. We passed by the auditorium and noticed a talent show just beginning. Mom pressured me to enter playing my trumpet. in this weird was-it costume no less. By the time I was to go on, I still had no clue what to play. I felt silly in my Halloween costume getup when nobody else was in costume unless they were dancing or a magician act. I walked down the aisle towards the stage with trumpet in hand, contemplating what to do in my nervousness. Heard whispers among the crowd. As I climbed the little 3 steps of stairs up on the stage, I trip and fall up the remaining 2 stairs. I'm so clumsy, so I stand up and play it off like I meant to do that. Began acting silly and tooting my horn like a duck. Did a silly dance to an improv version of the most basic song to play, Hot Cross Bun / 3 Blind Mice. Ripples of kids are giggling in the audience. I see my mother's face contorted in displeasure that I'm not being serious enough to win this. Too bad, mom. This is my time to shine in all my goofy glorious weirdness. I wiggle my top knot poof and play a few jazzy bits of songs some older folks should know. Then to finish off, I act like I'm swimming a bit and begin playing Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid I had learned the year before. End it with pretending to drown as I left back down the stairs without falling. Mom took me out in the hall to have her fit for about 10 minutes while the last contestants finish the show. She then goes off to look through my locker while I put away my trumpet and prepare to leave. I wait for her by the auditorium exit. They begin announcing the winners. I won first place. Suck it, mom. Studying abroad in England. I planned a weekend trip to Barcelona with this girl. This is pre-cell phones. I overslept. Got to the airport like 3 hours late. As soon as I arrive, there's the girl. At the exact same time we both say, I'm so sorry. Wait, what are you sorry for? Turns out she overslept too. British Airways changed our tickets for us. No charge. And we got to Barcelona a few hours late. Was seeing a guy for a few months, and then he told me he didn't think he was ready for a serious relationship yet. Fair enough. Then he posted about his new girlfriend 3 days later and now they are expecting in November. Plot twist or dodge bullet? During the last year of my grandfather's life he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma of course kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral and a man showed up that wasn't known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that it wasn't exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral home who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later my grandmother let slip that she is seeing someone. The guy from funeral. At this point nothing too odd. They got to talking at church and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later sweet innocent old grandma mentions that it's their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa died 2 years prior. This man was the person that grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought grandpa was going crazy. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being a vegetable for the last horrible year of his life. My friend in college was such a jock, worked out constantly, total womanizer, had posters of women in swimsuits, also pretty conservative politically. Few years later he's in a relationship with a black guy and also converted to Judaism. They adopted a baby girl from Korea. When I was a sophomore in high school, we had a rash of thefts occurring during classes. It was a small school and we had no hall monitor or cameras in the halls. It went on for months until the gym teacher happened to catch the kid in the act of stealing from someone's backpack. There was a ruckus out in the halls and my class ran out to see what was going on. The thief was the principal's son. The gym teacher was holding him by his wrist and was telling everyone he just caught him stealing. The kid then pretended to pass out and he just fell to the floor while everyone rolled their eyes and went back to class. He was known for trying to get attention however he could. So cringy. My mother's friend was married to a man for many years. They struggled to have kids because he had fertility issues and then later on she developed ovarian cancer and had a hysterectomy. Years later he cheats and leaves her blaming it on them having no children because of the hysterectomy. He and the woman he leaves her for proceed to conceive twins via IVF. Once those twins are born, his mistress finds out he doesn't have as much money as she thought, so she leaves him and the twins. So I mean, at least he got those kids he wanted so badly. There was a cookie exchange at my work. An odd pairing cookie was a rosemary caramel. It was so delicious I had 5 on my break. During the day I was so inspired. I worked in a bakery. I was just having the best day. All my favorite songs came on. And then I started getting these burps. It tasted like the rosemary. But something was off. I started feeling weird and tingly before my lunch break. My hand started to feel odd. Now, being the mixer for the day, I worked with heavy machinery and knives. Soon a manager came by and asked if anyone had some cookies. Short while later I find myself in a room with a handful of other people, all with odd issues. Some were confused. Others their stomachs felt off. EMTs, poison control, local police, firefighters were all cramming into the room to examine us all. Turns out that odd pairing was weed cookies. We were stoned out of our minds. I was getting late to catch a flight and hadn't checked in. Discovered when I reached the airport that I actually came to the wrong airport. Had to travel about 30 minutes to reach the other airport. Went to check in about 20 minutes before my flight. They didn't have any seats, so updated me to business class. Best flight of my life so far. This girl in my high school class got into a top university for political sciences. Super smart, friendly, daughter of one of the most powerful politicians in my country. Her mom was investigated for some illegal money stuff, and turns out her tuition money was coming from that. She had to drop off because they lost most of their money. This girl I know was embarrassed of her home, so whenever her boyfriend would go pick her up, she'd run to a subdivision like 5 minutes away from her house and waiting at the end of the driveway for her boyfriend, and when he would drop her off she'd just walk into the backyard of the house and say that she goes in through the back door. Her excuse was that her roommates were naughty, so she didn't want him to come in. She did this for almost a year, until he knocked on the door of that house unannounced once, and an old lady was confused as frick. Gotta be honest, I didn't see Trump coming. My father had one. He and my mom were never exactly happy. They divorced and my dad immediately marries another woman. She's way younger, blonde, loves doing housework, and just wants to dote on her man. Totally the opposite of my headstrong mother. My dad was even thinking how great this was, because now his life is set, and he doesn't never had to clean house or cook or anything. And his second wife gets cancer, and is gone in less than 2 years. But the plot twist is this: my dad starts asking, how do you cook? How do you clean, and bank and pay bills? And taught himself, and now takes care of his own self, which shocked the crap out of me. The baby wasn't his. And we could tell, because the husband was black, she was white, and the baby was Asian. Didn't see that one coming. Willie and Devin egged each other's houses. Devin also egged Tristan's house. Events that happened after, in order. Devin egged Willie a second time, because Willie did it once. Willie called the cops on Devin, but nothing happened. Tristan keyed Devin's car. Devin egged Willie once more in retaliation and even punched him. Thinking it was him, Willie called the cops again, and Devin got fined heavily. I heard he got arrested, but not sure about that. None of them actually egged each other the first time. It was me. My buddy and his girlfriend took a train to London to see a band play. It was a long journey, almost an hour, with a few stops. And once they were one stop away from London, they realized they didn't have the concert tickets. They got off the train, checked their bags, searched every pocket, checked their bags again, and decided to go back home to look there. They got back and found the tickets on the table in the hall of their house, and headed back out again. When they were arriving at the station for a second time, they had to wait because there was a potential bomb threat. It turned out there was an unattended bag which was being checked over by the bomb squad. Whose bag? My buddy's girlfriend bag. She'd left it at the station after looking for the tickets. This is my go-to answer for a lot of questions like this on Reddit, but it still blows my mind to this day. I was adopted from South America to the US when I was a toddler and have no memory of my birth parents. I had an older friend/mentor I met in college. I knew him as Mike. When I learned that my birth mother passed away, I got a few of her belongings, including some pictures. Who was in these pictures? Mike. He was my birth father. This isn't my proudest moment either, but whatever. I was 19, and I had just started a job at a new sushi restaurant. Well, the manager that was showing me around my first 5 days was young and pretty cute. She seemed flirtatious, but I wasn't trying to push or assume anything, because I was a new hire. Well, after that week, she went on a vacation for a month to the Philippines, so I kind of forgot about her. Well, a month later she returns, and she is out drinking. So at 2:30 in the morning I get a random call from her saying that she has been drinking and is now driving, which I hate, and she wanted to talk to someone. Anyway, after a lot of bullcrap from her end, she ends up at my place, cause she needed to go to the bathroom, and I wanted her off the road. She ends up deciding she can't/shouldn't drive, and she wants to stay the night. So I set up the extra futon for her, cause she is my manager and I ain't trying to cause no problems lol. Well, she decides that she sobered the frick up when I turn out the lights, and she starts getting talkative and flirtatious. Things escalate and I end up stopping it before we have sex. At this point it's 5 in the morning and I ask her, "You good to drive?" She responds, "Yeah, I should probably get going. My husband is at home waiting for me." What the frick? One of my friends was convinced that they were straight for ages. Used to laugh about lesbians hitting on them, not at the lesbians. Mind you, they just didn't get why it happened so much. Flash forward a few years. Whoops, they were gay all along. Dude was hitting on a woman, and she was totally into him. Then he starts complaining and whining about meeting women online that catfish him and are much less attractive in person. She went from 100 0 in .2 and had a look on her face like, "Oh god, please get me out of here." Had a manager at my high school job in fast food. She was overbearing, micromanager, suck up to the GM, pain in the ass. She always walked around like hot crap because she was the youngest manager, like I give a crap. Happily married for 9 years in December. She is a stay-at-home mom with our 2 sons now. My sister's boyfriend decided that he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave his 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He had bad phone service, so they mostly kept in touch through emails. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a coworker and a week of sleuthing later, and it turns out he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. When I realized that my phone is connected to a Bluetooth speaker while I was watching some good crap. One of my high school friends has a very strange brother who likes to pretend he's a girl on online games to get free stuff from people or something like that. After I graduated, I moved to Boston for college. They live in Texas, and last winter I went back to visit my friend, and I was hanging out in her house when I saw her brother's laptop in the game room open with pictures of this girl on the desktop. He said they were random pictures he found of some girl who posted on Reddit. They were SFW pics, but her account was inactive 4 years now, so he was using those pics to prove to someone he was a girl in the game he was playing. It blew my mind, because that girl went to my school and was in my acting class.